Join Drs. Savanah Craig and Ronnetta Sartor as we navigate life beyond graduation. Real conversations about forging our own paths in our early years in our careers. There's a reason it's called practicing dentistry. All right. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond Graduation. I'm Savanah Craig.
And I am Ronnetta Sartor. Welcome back.
This week we are talking, it's a big topic, but we're going to call it Associateship 101. A little bit about how we found our associateships, it's our experience. We've got nothing else for you, but we'll share as best we can about the wild world of life after dental school, as always. So, Ronnetta, you had the reputation in your residency class, and it continued to stick with you even when I was in residency, about just how many job interviews Ronnetta went on in residency.
I know. I think, well, a little bit of background. I think I went on so many of them is because I didn't have the words to describe what I was looking for. It was more so a gut feeling.
Yes.
Like once I was in it, like once I was in the place I was supposed to be, or went on an interview and heard all that the opportunity had to offer, I would just know. And so, to your point,
it sounds so woo-woo, but it's so true, because I had the same experience when I interviewed, and our attendings in residency told me that, and I was like, and they're like, you'll walk in the door and you'll know if it's a comfortable place for you.
You'll know. So it's funny because, residency starts July, end of June, beginning of July. So I interviewed from October to April. And I went on so many of them that by the time I got to the last interview that I went on, I knew with clarity what I didn't want.
Yes.
And for me, that was as important as like having a clear description of what I wanted.
Yep.
And so my last interview in April ended up being the place that I called home for almost 5 years. And what I was looking for in a residency, I know it now, but I didn't know it then. I was looking for mentorship. I was looking to be able to expand all of the things that I learned in my residency program. And, Savanah and we did our residency at different times, but at the same institution, which it's now Prisma Health in Columbia, South Carolina. When I went, it was Palmetto Health Richland in Columbia, South Carolina. But, we learned about IV conscious sedation. We learned about, 3D dentistry, and it's at my point, it was in its early phases, right? And CEREC and
implants and surgery and
right, all of those things.
We did it all.
Right. It was important to me to step into an associateship, not only where I'll be able to expand it, but where if I failed, I had someone to help me, or someone to bounce ideas off of, so that I wouldn't fail and I could be the best that I could be for my patient. So it ended up working out. Like, what about you, Savanah? What was your process? You have an interesting perspective because you were in South Carolina and then was moving back to Ohio.
Yeah, that makes going on interviews pretty challenging. To be totally fair. It was nice though, because I didn't go on that many interviews, but I talked to a lot of people. I did a lot of phone interviews, which honestly was cool in some ways, because it was a good excuse to be like, let me feel it out over the phone, because it's going to be such a big commitment to take time off residency to go back to Ohio and all of those things. But just like you, I wanted to use all of the skills that I learned in residency. So that was super important to me. It ended up being a lot more of a gut decision than a brain decision, which, as dentists and science backgrounds and those sorts of things, you don't expect your job interview to be such a like emotional decision, but it kind of was. Just where you feel like you fit, where you felt like you were heard. The other thing that was really important to me, in the end, it came down to two pretty similar, at least on paper, practice styles of big group practice, because I knew I really wanted to do the surgery and the IV sedation and those sorts of things, and wanting one of the practices really was strong in everybody here practices how we want you to, and that can be a really awesome experience for some people. But I had just spent a year learning to practice how I wanted to practice and with the skills that I had worked really hard to learn. And so to come into a practice and change all of that was not something I was interested in. Where the job I ended up in, they were very open to collaboration and letting me use the skills that I had gained and expand on them, and offering CE and mentorship, but also giving me the room to implement the whole IV sedation thing in a practice that didn't have it at the level that I'm now doing it. And so finding that nuance between support and mentorship and also allowing you to practice the way you wanted to practice. And that's thankfully the job that I found.
What you said is amazing, and it's very true. One of the questions that came to me while you were speaking was, what questions did you ask in your interview processes to get to the bottom of, the one practice kind of want you to be cookie cutter and do things their way?
Yeah.
Versus, knowing, okay, what questions did you ask the owners and because I'm sure you spoke with the team as well.
Yeah. Part of that was just slowly in the interview process, I have training in implant placement. What systems do you use? I'm more familiar with this one. Would it be possible to implement that in the practice? Coming at, as you ask more questions of how do you do this? Is there any possibility of changing? This is what I'm familiar with. Or, oh, I see that you do that this way. What training would be available to me to get on board with that? And those questions help you sort of suss out what's possible. The other thing I was really fortunate in the interview process was having other mentors and docs who had done the interviews and gotten associateships, and our residency directors telling me to ask for things that I didn't even know I could ask for. And the more questions you ask of an owner, the more you understand their perspective on an associate, I guess is the best way to say it. Do they see you as an equal in the practice and somebody to help grow the practice, or do they see you as an employee? Not that there's anything wrong with being I think there's a difference between an employee and a team member. And even though those are on paper the same thing, the way you talk about the other team members is really telling.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know that you could ask for them to pay for your scrubs, because that's technically something required of your employment. And if you're a W-2 employee, they have to provide you a lot of the things, required for working in the office.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one that I had mentors tell me to ask for. Asking for help covering like my DEA license, or paying towards malpractice, paying towards all of these things. And just, again, the more questions you can ask of somebody, the better feel you're going to get for. And it's not always going to be a yes, right? That would be crazy. But you at least understand, hey, we can't do this, but we'll help you in this area, and those sorts of things.
Yeah, I think in addition to what you said, listening for the responses and whether there is room to negotiate.
Oh, yes.
Because if everything you ask is immediately shut down, depending on your personality, it may or may not be the place for you.
Yeah.
And you and I have kind of talked about this before, but when I was always taught that when you go on an interview, you know, you're not the only person being interviewed. You're interviewing them as well to
Most
get more
definitely.
information to see if it's a right fit for you both.
Correct.
And I think you made an excellent point when you talked about what or how the owner doctor views the associate. Are you just going to be their cash cow to bring money? And it's not to be
Yeah.
mean, but like,
Yeah.
are you just there to make them money, or are you there to be, an awesome team member? One thing I love about Dr. Rice is that he always says that a mentorship goes both ways, right?
Yeah.
The mentee learns from the mentor, and the mentor too learns from the mentee. It should make you both better.
Yeah.
Um,
I think the other point, not just is the associate the cash cow, is the associate just the person they're going to dump all the crap on?
Very true.
Like,
So back to our point about questions, one of the questions that I was told to ask is, how are the new patients divvied up?
Yep.
If you're in a group practice, if it's something that I treatment plan, and am I going to be the one to see that patient? So, if I treatment plan a full mouth rehab, does it slip through my fingers because you're the owner doctor? Now, if the patient specifically asks for the owner, that's normal.
Sure.
I'm the same way. If when I'm going to the doctor, if my doctor is not going to be there, I want to know. I don't want you to put me with someone that I don't have a relationship with yet,
Yeah. 100%.
So I 100%, get that. But I think that brought up a really good point about asking those questions. Um, will you only see all of the new patients? What will that interaction be? Are you going to be responsible for the majority of the hygiene exams?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how will you get patients on your schedule? Are you expected to bring the patients to the practice, or will the office supply you the patients?
Right. Are they marketing? Is there enough patients for everybody?
Ooh, that's a big one. That's a really big one. Because, in my millions of interviews that I went on, I always asked, can I see what the schedule looks like?
Yep.
What's it look like today versus, a month down the line? In the associateship that I ended up going to, he needed someone. Like, he was booked
there
out.
was too much.
It was too much. I went to some interviews where they showed me the schedule, and the doctor, the solo doctor that was there, they didn't even have enough for themselves. So it's like, okay, well, if I come, how's that going to work? I really don't think, you're going to have enough to like keep me busy. And when I say keep me busy, I was very eager to continue learning dentistry.
Yeah.
And everyone's different. Some people could read a book, like you're a speed reader and you retain a whole lot of stuff, right? But I know that in order for me to get better at something, I have to like physically do it.
Right.
And everyone's different.
I think another point to that is, they told us in residency, do they want an associate or do they need an associate? And asking if they've had an associate in the past, because there are, in some instances, solo practices that you don't necessarily need an extra doctor, but like the idea of somebody doing the hygiene checks or covering while you're on vacation, and while that's nice, that's not a full-time patient load. So finding out exactly why this position has come available in the practice. And there are more subtle ways to ask that, but I think getting to the bottom of that tells you a ton about what you're stepping into. Just the more questions you can ask. It's like dating, right? You're going to spend more time with this person likely than the other people closest to you in your life. So you better at least be able to stand them in some capacity.
And I think that point drives home too, because it's not just the owner or the other doctor that's there, it's the team as well. Okay, what's this team like? Do I feel like I was received well from the team? Will there be obstacles in terms of scheduling? Like, if they don't like my personality, will they not schedule me patients?
Yeah, that is a real concern. One interview that I went on, I'll never forget this. I walked into the interview, and my mom's a hygienist. She taught me how to, nudge my way into an office and make friends. So I show up with a dozen donuts to my interview. And I, hey, I'm Savanah Craig. And they're like, oh, are you a dental student here shadowing? And I said, no, I'm here to interview as an associate doctor. And they were like, oh, they had no idea I was coming. And it was just such a yucky feeling. And then everyone I encountered, they were like, oh, are you here shadowing? And I'm like, somebody send out an email or a text message that I'm trying to get a job.
I'm just going to say it's because you look so young. They thought
Sure.
it's no way that you could be a dentist.
I was like, can you imagine you show up to an interview and nobody knows that you're trying to interview for a job? So
yeah, that was your first impression.
Yeah,
and it was lasting.
Bad. It was a bad first impression.
It was very lasting.
So, I mean, as a tip to all you owners out there trying to hire an associate, just put a block on the schedule. Let people know that somebody's coming to interview. It's very awkward otherwise.
What would you say are some